Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cutting Edge Figure Skating Podcast. My name is Kim Dunaway, and in this episode, I will be breaking down all four disciplines, event by event, for the 2025 Grand Prix. Assignments came out literally just hours ago. Super exciting in the middle of the summer when we get these assignments. I knew when I put my last podcast out on Sunday that my break would be short. Didn't know that it was only going to be 4 days, but it's all right. It's exciting to talk about these matchups. And of course, it's funny to go back and listen to this months from now, once the Grand Prix has actually happened, to see how wrong I was about some of these things. But it's fun to talk about it right now when it's fresh and hot off the press. And some of these I haven't even really had a chance to dig into yet. So you'll get my really live feedback on what I think about these Grand Prix. So before we get into the matchups, reminder first of just who qualifies for the Grand Prix. So those that have two spots, if you finish in the top 12 at Worlds for the women and the men, then you're guaranteed two spots. If you finish in the top 10 for either ice dance or pairs, then you're also guaranteed two spots. You're also guaranteed two spots if you have finished in the top 6 at Worlds within the past 10 years and you are coming back for the first time, which applies to both Maya and Alex Shibutani and to Sui and Han of China. So we're going to see two teams that we have not seen in a while, and they both have two Grand Prix assignments, and that's why. Now, to get one spot on the Grand Prix, you need to finish either in the top 24 of the season's best score for your discipline or in the top 24 for world standing points. So this is really when going to challengers and getting those world standing points really matters, not just for placement at ISU championships to determine your group that you're starting in, but here in the case of determining whether or not you would qualify to get a spot in the Grand Prix. We also have one other funny rule, and that is what we kind of call the split couple rule. And we have seen this before with like Alexa Knierim and Brandon Frazier. Here we're going to see it with Fonio Baudry Cizeron, who will be skating for France, even though this is based on Laurence's previous partnership where she skated for Canada. But if a couple has placed in the top 12 at Worlds in any of the prior 3 seasons, then they can base their placement based upon those results, right? And so obviously with Laurence and her former partner, they were in the top 5 a couple of times at Worlds. They had some problems in their last Worlds. That's not important, but that allows them to qualify for Grand Prix assignments here. All right, let's get into the disciplines. And I'm going to start with men. I haven't had a chance to really dig into the men's a whole lot. I looked at the assignments during my lunch break today, but I really sort of zoned in on the other 3 disciplines. So let's take a look at men. So the thing to remember this season is we're not kicking off with Skate America like we have in pretty much every season that I can remember. So basically, I think it was France that requested that they have an earlier date. And so Skate America is actually going to be Grand Prix number 5 this season, which definitely made a difference in terms of some of the American skaters that we might ordinarily see at Skate America choosing to go to other Grand Prix instead, maybe not wanting to wait as long to skate, wanting to have more time off between their Grand Prix and a potential Grand Prix final. So at Grand Prix France, we've got Mikhail Solevko of Estonia, Luke Economides of France, Adam Himfa of France, a to-be-determined man from France, Nika Agazzi, Gabrielle Fragapani, Cal Mura, Tesua Tuboy, Lucas Bridgke, Ilya Malinin, Maxim Naumov, and Andrew Torgashev. So the U.S. has got 3 skaters here. Japan's got 2 skaters. And then France plans to have 3 skaters. The ones who definitely stand out here is we've got a head-to-head matchup right off the bat with Adam Himfa and Ilya Malinin. Ordinarily, you would expect these two to sort of be split up. And if they're in the top 3 at Worlds, they would be split up. But Adam was 4th this past year at Worlds. And so here they are going head-to-head at the very first Grand Prix of the season. We're also going to have Cal Mura here. Cal Mura went up against Ilya Malinin at Skate America in the first Grand Prix of last season. So they definitely stand out as the medal contenders, but we know that Cal had a very tough season last year. So you could look at Andrew Torgashev, who medaled at a Grand Prix last year, who's definitely going to want to rebound off of the world's performance that he had in the free skate. Unfortunately for him, Kasua Tuboy made the world team, didn't have the best showing for him either. And Maxim Naumov, who's going to have a lot of attention on him this season based upon, of course, the tragedy that he experienced losing his parents. So it's a lot of very interesting storylines coming here. So that right off the top looks to be a very exciting Grand Prix. Moving on to Cup of China, we've got Vladimir Leventsev, Dawai Dai, Boyang Jin, a to be determined Chinese man, Daniel Grassel, Shun Sato, Sota Yamamoto, Mikhail Shadorov, Junwan Cha, Denis Vasilyev, Camden Polkanen, and Jacob Sanchez making his Grand Prix debut as a senior. So obviously the ones that stand out here, Shun Sato made the Grand Prix final last year, was right in the mix at Worlds and pretty much every competition that he was at last season. Mikhail Shadorov coming off of his silver medal finish at World. Junwan Cha, who is a silver medalist at Worlds. We have not seen him at that form a lot since that moment, but that's three big heavyweights right here. And we haven't talked about Sota Yamamoto, who has won Grand Prix in the past, made Grand Prix final. What can Jacob Sanchez do? He did not have a quad in juniors, but won almost everything in juniors this season, was so strong. Very interested to see what he looks like. Boyang Jin is always a huge wild card. We saw last year he won the short program at Grand Prix France and then completely fell apart in the free skate. And of course, Daniel Grassel made Grand Prix final last season. So this is an interesting one in that we don't have, I feel like, the big head-to-head matchup like we see at Grand Prix France. But between Junwan and Mikhail and Shun, definitely going to be very competitive. All right, moving on to Skate Canada. We've got Steven Gogolev of Canada, Alexa Rakic, Roman Sadovsky, Alexander Solevko of Estonia, Kevin Amos, Nika Agatsi, Nikolai Mimola, Kalmura, Kazuki Tomono, Vladimir Samolov of Poland, Luca Broussard of the U.S., and Ilya Malinin in his second Grand Prix. So he's going very early, getting his two events out pretty early. Looks to be an easier field for Ilya for sure. Kalmura is here again. Kazuki Tomono is very, very inconsistent, and you never quite know what you're going to get with Kevin. Now, Kevin beat Ilya in the free skate at Skate America last season, but I think this, to me, looks just a little bit less competitive than the first couple that we have. The biggest competition probably comes from the three Canadian men who are all going to be vying for that one Canadian spot at the Olympics. And I think we come into the season with Roman definitely as the guy, and the other guys are going to have to sort of move him from that pedestal to get there. But here's a great opportunity that they'll have in a head-to-head battle. And last year was not a good showing for really any of the Canadian men at Skate Canada. If you remember, Roman withdrew after the short program. Steven Gogolev finished 9th there, and their best finishing guy was actually Alexa Rakic, who finished 7th. So they'll be all looking for redemption this season for sure. And we've got those little mini competitions within the competition between like a Kazuki and a Cow to see how they do against each other. At NHK, we have Boyang doing his second Grand Prix, Francois Patat of France, Gabriel Frangipani going against his teammate Matteo Risso. And then we've got Yuma Kageyama making his Grand Prix debut at home, along with Shun Sato, a to-be-determined Japanese man, Junwan Cha, Lucas Bridgke, Adam Hagara, Jimmy Ma, and Andrew Torgashev. This one looks like Yuma for sure, and Shun. Junwa and Lucas come in with a lot of potential. Lucas comes in as the reigning European champion. Very uneven last season. I'm sure he's going to want to be much more consistent this year. Injury-free, hopefully, for him also. Same thing with Junwa. He's struggled with injuries a lot in the Grand Prix the last couple of seasons. Can we see him at their best and really push those other two Japanese men that are here? You know, how does Matteo Rizzo do this season? He didn't make Worlds last year. There's only 2 Italian men spots. It's going to be super competitive for a home Olympics. He debuted what is basically going to be his long program at Europeans this past season. It wasn't quite ready yet, but I feel like by the time we see it here, it's probably going to be really, really fantastic. And I think Lucas, like I said, is a big wild card, and so is Andrew. And frankly, so is Jimmy Ma. I mean, Jimmy is going to probably be in the top three after the short program because that's his pattern. What does he do in the free skate, though? All right, let's move on to Skate America. We've got Vladimir Levintsev, Dawai Dai, Kevin Amos, Luke Economides. Oh, he got 2 Grand Prix spots. That's exciting. If you didn't see my season's best list, he was very high on my season's best list. All right, we got Corey Curcelli making his Grand Prix debut for Italy at Skate America also. Nikolai Mimola, Kazuki Tomono, Tsua Tupoi, Mikhail Shadorov, Jason Brown will be at home at Skate America, and then a to be determined spot for the U.S., which is not uncommon for the U.S. to have a to be determined spot. What is interesting is that there are 3 host spots available, and the U.S. decided to only use 2 of those, which is weird. It's not like they don't have enough guys. They definitely do. I mean, I don't understand the wisdom here. Even if you have, I mean, unless they got that spot somewhere else, like they've got 3 U.S. men at France and 3 U.S. men at Finlandia, I don't understand why you would give up a spot when they have plenty of men that you could have given that to. You could, now, granted, they still have a host spot, so might you give Jacob a second Grand Prix? Might you have Camden there, who only has 1 Grand Prix assignment? Might you give an opportunity to someone like Liam Kapakis? Do they throw Tomoki Hiwatashi there? There's definitely a lot of people that could go into that spot. But looking at it and as a totality, it feels a little muted from what we've had in the previous years just because Ilya won't be there. So it definitely looks like Mikhail Shadorov doesn't have a huge contender behind him, except for maybe Kevin, who does skate well in the U.S. usually. Again, we've got Daniel Grassel. What are you going to get? How can Nikolai Mimola really capitalize on his success at Europeans? And can he get on the podium here? Great opportunity. Jason Brown. The American crowd would love nothing more than to see Jason Brown on a podium at Skate America for sure. All right, and let's look at Finlandia, which I sort of penciled in all 4 disciplines as just a incredibly stacked Grand Prix. So this one, we've got Roman Sadovsky, Mikhail Salevko, a to-be-determined guy from Finland, Adam Himfa. So he's got maybe the biggest gap in his Grand Prix, going first and going last. Matteo Rizzo, Yuma Kageyama, Sodi Yamamoto, Dennis Vasiliev, Andres Nordebak of Sweden, Lucas Broussard, who's going to get 2 Grand Prix. Interesting choice. And Jason Brown of the U.S. and Jimmy Ma. So obviously here stands out, we've got an Adam and Yuma showdown. So both of Adam's Grand Prix, again, because he was 4th at Worlds, he gets 2 real heavy hitters to showdown with. So this could be really interesting, especially with Grand Prix finals on the line for both of those guys. But also, Sodi Yamamoto, is he going to be in that conversation? Really depends on how he would have done at Cup of China. How did Jason Brown do at Skate America? Can he insert himself into that conversation as well? And an opportunity for Roman without his other Canadian teammates to have a good showing here as well. So that's the men's. I think for me, the most exciting is maybe just the first one, just because an Adam versus Ilya showdown is really interesting to me. Seeing Maxim at the Grand Prix, especially versus Andrew Torgashev, is also a very interesting matchup for me. Lucas is there. I think I like that one maybe the best out of all of the 6. Okay, let's move on to pairs. So in pairs, in France, we've got Golubeva and Giotopoulos Moore of Australia, Deanna and Max of Canada. We've got Fala and Bell from France, along with 2 to-be-determined spots for France. The Kovalevs only have 1 other assignment. Why are they not assigned to their home Grand Prix? That's by far and away their best pair team. Strange to me, but okay. And then we've got Maria Pavlova and Alexei Shevchenko of Hungary, Mirin Kihara of Japan, and Shin and Naj of the US. So right off the bat, we've got a showdown between Stiletto and Deschamps and Mirin Kihara. Should be very, very fun. Both of these teams, to me, oftentimes do well in their first Grand Prix, but I feel like both teams tend to be a bit inconsistent in the Grand Prix as well. In the season that Deanna and Max won Worlds, they were fabulous at the Skate Canada Grand Prix that they were at with that interview with the Vampire program. But most of the time, it just seems like there's a lot of little issues, and the same with Mira and Kiara. They really peak much later in the season. So this really might be a situation where who puts out the best skate at the time, and it could completely flip flop later in the Grand Prix and at Grand Prix final. And at Cup of China, we have a new team of Fiona Bombardier and Benjamin Mamar of Canada. They debuted last season at some challengers and at Canadian Nationals, where they were fourth, but this will be the first time that we're going to see them on the Grand Prix. There's definitely a lot of potential there. If you remember, he was originally paired with Brooke McIntosh, who then skated for Spain last season and unfortunately has broken up with that partner as well. And we'll get to see Benjamin and Fiona in year 2 and see how they do. Big news here, obviously, is Sui and Han. So I said in my last podcast that definitely looks like all the signs were pointing that they're back. Here is absolute confirmation of that. They will be not just here, but at 2 Grand Prix this season. No idea what to expect for them. Zero idea what to expect for them, because just a couple of months ago, she was training with a completely different partner. So obviously there's a familiarity with this partnership, but Hong Kong retired literally a couple of seasons ago. So, how is his injury? How is his back? How quickly do they sort of get back? Does he still have triples? Like all of the questions, right? I certainly expect for this team to show up at a challenger event somewhere and this not be the first time that we see them. I hope, just so that we can get a little bit more of a gauge, but who knows? This might be the first time that we see them. And have no idea what to expect. These are the reigning Olympic champions, and there's no idea what to expect from this team. Looking at the rest of the field, who are they going to be up against? Meltik and Embaralava of Georgia, Conti and Mashi of Italy, McBeath and Parkman of the U.S., and Gainish and Shigarev of Uzbekistan. So it certainly looks like if they just go and stay on their feet, they should make the podium, right? I don't see, Bombardier and Mamar competing against these two in their first Grand Prix. Don't really see that for McBeath and Parkman. Hopefully they've found a little bit more consistency. Obviously, they had a really great free skate at Nationals, but for me, they have been incredibly inconsistent at times. Really good practice skaters, not really great competition skaters at this point. So you've got Conti and Mashi, who were on the podium this year, had fabulous season last year, and going into this season with the home Olympics, that could be a lot of pressure for them, or they could be really excited. And then, of course, Meltik and Embaralava, who might be my early pick to win this Grand Prix. You never know what to expect from them, but they can put up 140-point free skates easy. It'd be interesting to see what kind of material that they have, but this could be a win for Sui and Han, or this could be a struggle. We just really don't know. I wasn't overly impressed with Gainish and Shigarev's material last year. What do they look like in year 2 of them competing on the Grand Prix? So I feel like there's a lot of question marks at Cup of China, for sure. Moving on to Skate Canada, we've got Gilabeva and Giotopoulos Moore, Lauren and ETA from Canada, Pierre and Michaud, and Delato Dudek and Duchamp. They went with their top 3 to go at home. And then we've got Anastasia Vapon-Law and Luke Digby, who had a fantastic season last year, Hassi and Volodin. And then I'm going to totally butcher these names from Switzerland. I do really enjoy this team. I remember that fun, African style kind of free skate that they had last season, but Oksana and Tom, that way I don't butcher their last names, and then Ellie Kim and Danny O'Shea of the U.S. So this is a pretty competitive one also, because Golubaev and Giotopoulos Moore are definitely capable and have medaled at the Grand Prix. Pierre and Michaud have won Grand Prix before. Delato and Dudek, Duchamp, that goes without saying. And then Hassi and Volodin, so within a hair of winning the World Championships this past year. So basically, Deanna and Max get to go against the current world champions and the ones that are just right there in both of their Grand Prix. It's going to be pretty tough. Now, even if they finish second at those Grand Prix, they'll make Grand Prix final just fine. But I know they would like to go in with wins like they did this past season when they really didn't have any competition coming in as world champions. But here, finishing 5th at Worlds, they're definitely going to feel it with some really big competition in both of their Grand Prix. And Cam and O'Shea, big question marks, but Danny is back on the ice in training from his broken toe, which is really, really good news for them. and they've been, posting some throws on Instagram. So I'm just still here keeping that hope alive. All right, on to NHK Trophy. And we've got Sui and Han again, the Kovalevs, Pavlova and Fyodchenko, Conti and Mashi, a to be determined from Japan. So Miri and Kihara will not be here. Perhaps they didn't want them to go against Sui and Han. I don't know. But then we've also got Danilova and Siba, Efimova and Mitrofanov, and Chan and Hao. So Nagioka and Moriguchi are at Finlandia, but I think they would most likely get the to be determined spot here. I don't think that they have another senior eligible team really. So I don't know why that's to be determined, but maybe they're hoping that there's another team that they can slot in. We'll see. But this is the only Grand Prix that we're going to see Chan and Hao at, unless they get the host spot at Skate America. We'll get there in just a second. But this is the only one that they're assigned, which is interesting, but I'll talk about that in a second. Efimova and Mitrofanov definitely is a possibility for them getting on the podium here. They've got some stiff competition, though, between Conti and Mashi, Pavlova and Fyodchenko, and Sui and Han. Now, they beat Pavlova and Fyodchenko at Worlds. I don't expect for Maria and Alexei to come into this season like they did last season. Last season was just like struggle bus. It never really came together. It was so weird to see them struggle in a lot of technical elements that they've been doing really brilliantly for the past couple of seasons. So I really expect to see them a little bit better and more rejuvenated coming into this season. And then if we look at Skate America, we've got Lauren and ETA, Meltik and Eberlava, Hawk and Kunkel, and this is their only Grand Prix assignments. Now, they could get slotted somewhere else if somebody withdraws, but right now they just have one because they had really, really awful Worlds and did not finish in the top 10 this season. Mira and Kihara are here again at Skate America. And then we have the Grand Prix debut of Olivia Flores and Luke Wang, who are moving up from juniors. They won a silver medal at Junior Worlds 2 seasons ago. Didn't quite find that same success this season. Plazas and Fernandez are slotted here. They're making a comeback after missing all of last season due to injury. Been watching their videos on Instagram also, and they're looking really good. And then we've got a to be determined spot, which, like I said, could be Chan and Hao. They could put a team like Williams and Lure there. We'll see. A lot of the times, the U.S. will have to be determined spots in every discipline, and they'll pick somebody from Champs Camp, basically, to sort of slot there. And then we've got Gainish and Chigarev in their second Grand Prix. So here, the early favorites obviously are going to be Mura and Kihara and Meltik and Eberlava. And then that next spot definitely looks like Hawk and Kunkel, but it could be anybody's game if they can land on their feet, because we know how much Annika oftentimes will struggle with those triple Salchows that she has in both programs. And then going into the last Grand Prix, we've got Pierre and Luchot of Canada. We've got Zhang and Huang, who are a Chinese junior team that are moving up. Again, I don't know why they're not slotted for Cup of China. Also, I assume they'll be there. It's not like they have other teams really to put there. Just strange to me. They made my season's best list for pairs, by the way. And then we've got Hassi and Volodin, Gilardi and Ambrosini, who unfortunately for them only have one Grand Prix. But again, might they end up somewhere else potentially? Nagioka and Moriguchi of Japan, Chechtenina and Wozniak of Poland, Efimova and Mitrofanov, and Cam and O'Shea. So the top 2 Americans are going head-to-head in Finlandia, which is a choice. And then we've got Hassi Volodin here as the main team that are expected to win. And then a lot of teams here who could go on the podium. I mean, between Leah and Trent, Rebecca and Filippo, Alicia and Misha, and Ellie and Danny, I think any of those teams could really round out onto the podium. I'm very interested to see how Zhang and Huang do. They were so fantastic in juniors last season. 2 really good side-by-side triple jumps. I think that they'll kind of slot into seniors quite nicely. They just got to add a third additional lift that they don't have in juniors. But I'm really excited to see this team, and I hope to see them at Cup of China also. All right. In pairs, I think this one is interesting just because there's a lot of meat in the middle, but I think I'm definitely looking at Grand Prix France for that Deanna and Max and Mira and Kihara showdown, and the same thing at Skate Canada with Hassi and Volodin and them again. All right, moving on to ice dance. This is probably what I'm maybe most excited about in terms of a lot of the head-to-head matchups that we're going to see here. So right off the bat in France, I think France, maybe because they're going first this year, and maybe it's going to be hard to get them to go back to their old placement. They're getting a lot of really, really fantastic matchups. So here is our lineup at Grand Prix France. Marie Laureat, Romain Legac of Canada, Fournier Baudry, Cizeron of France, two to be determined spots from France, Davis and Smolkin of Georgia, Fear and Gibson of Great Britain, Guinard and Fabry of Italy, Reed and Ambrulevicius of Lithuania, Brody and Somerville for the U.S., and Peyton By of the U.S. That's a bloodbath, okay? We've got the two teams, Fear and Gibson and Guinard and Fabry, who are going to be at it anyway because it feels like they're both competing for that same spot. And you throw in Fournier Baudry and Cizeron in there. Very, very spicy. But then you've also got teams that are kind of right there. And Reed and Ambrulevicius, Brody and Somerville medaled at a Grand Prix last season. Like, this is a Davis and Smolkin, can come out and shock people. As we saw them third after Skate America last year, they had a really good free dance at Worlds and moved up quite a bit. So this one looks really, really spicy for me off the bat. So if I had a little like jalapeno sticker, I'm sticking it right here on this matchup. We go to Cup of China. We've got Zhao and He of China and Ring and Jing. Both of those really good teams, well matched. A lot of different. I mean, they have so much. They're so different as teams, but they're very competitive with each other. There's not one that's like a huge, big time, a lot better than the other. So I think it's going to be a competitive battle for these two teams this season. And then we've got a to be determined spot from China. We've got Smart and Deke, Demoget and Lemercier, Lopareva and Brazeau, Lemon Kwan, Chalk and Bates, Green and Parsons, and Zingis and Kolesnik. Okay, so this is a very interesting one because you've got Chalk and Bates, who you expect to win. You've got a lot of teams here who could make noise. And that you've got Lopareva and Brazeau coming off of a really strong season for them, where they made Grand Prix final, and then just kind of fell off a little bit at Worlds. And now they've got a team from France. It's probably going to be slotted above them. At least that's the thought process. So are they going to have the same type of success that they had last season? Or are we going to see a little bit of a decline in the scoring for them? I certainly hope not, because that would be completely unfair, by the way. But there also can be very similar to a team like Green and Parsons or Zingis and Kolesnik and Smart and Deke, right? Who medaled at Skate America last year, got a small medal at Worlds last year, top 6 at Worlds. They're going to be trying to get on the podium here also, because this is definitely a Grand Prix that, I mean, it wouldn't be crazy for them to finish second. And then all of a sudden they're in the conversation to get into Grand Prix final. So this is very competitive. And it's one of those Grand Prix that it's going to be like the pattern step is going to matter. The levels are going to matter. And I really hope to see Demoget and Lemercier really bounce back this year. It's so unfortunate for them that they're likely to miss out on the Olympics due to the Fournier Baudry Cizeron pairing. But I really hope to see them do better than they did last year. Moving on to Skate Canada, we've got Gillis and Poirier, Lejoie and Legas, the Moraz-Czechs of Czech Republic, Turkula and Bers-Lewis of Finland, von Rensburg and Stefan from Germany, Reed and Ambrulevicius, Brody and Somerville, Carrera and Ponomarenko, Nisset and Markelov, and then a to-be-determined team from Canada. Oh boy. So for starters, the to-be-determined team from Canada, probably going to be Fabry and Air, I would think. So in the off-season, Natasha Bashna and Peter Beaumont broken up. And there's rumors about maybe he's paired up with, was it Audubon Morozov? Was that one of the rumors? I don't know. I won't get too deep in the weeds of the rumor mill. But I'm thinking that Fabry and Air would get that spot since they just have one other Grand Prix. But Laureat and Legac also only have one Grand Prix. So, there's some potential different people that could take that to be determined spot for Canada. But this is an interesting one because Carrera and Ponomarenko versus Lejoie and Legac, likely for a spot at Grand Prix final. Whoever finishes second here is going to set themselves up well for that. Lejoie and Legac seemingly had that spot all last season up until Worlds, and Christine and Anthony sort of jumped over them. So what does it look like this season? I think it's going to do a lot with material, right? As well as how well you perform the elements, which the last couple of seasons, Christine and Anthony have done incredibly well. Does the Shibutanis coming back affect their scoring at all? That remains to be seen. And they've got a head-to-head matchup with Brody and Somerville as well. a team like Reed and Ambrulivicious. Again, all these teams are so close together. Turculin versus Lewis, a team that I think should be vying for a podium spot. Against Lazois and Lagat and Carrera and Ponomarenko, but they just haven't been able to get there. There's just always levels and different things that sort of prevents them from getting there. So this is a tough spot for them because they could be 4th or 7th, and that's not crazy, just kind of based upon the competitiveness here. What did Nisset and Markelov look like in year 2? Really enjoyed both of their programs last season. Can't wait to see what they come up with in this next season. I believe this is their only Grand Prix assignment this season, at least so far. Again, they could get a to-be-determined spot at Skate America or could slot in for somebody else if they get injured. Moving on to NHK, we've got Fabry and Air of Canada, the Tashlers from Czech Republic, who have had a coaching change since the last time that we saw them at Worlds. They have moved to Maurizio Margaglio's team. Interestingly enough, I mentioned on the Worlds podcast that they were going to New York after Boston Worlds with Julia Turkila and Orihara and Pirinen, and who both trained with Maurizio Margaglio. I'm like, have they been kind of in their ear? Like, I wonder, what kind of maybe spurred this change. I'm super excited to see because he's so good at packaging, and that's really what they need so desperately. They're also going to be working with Massimo Scali as well, who choreographed Alyssa Liu's programs. And then we've also got Orihara and Pirinen of Finland. They're new teammates, Fear and Gibson, Guinard and Fabry. So they're going head-to-head in both of their Grand Prix this season. We've got Tanaka and Nishiyama of Japan, and Yoshida and Morita. Gray and Parsons, the Shibutanis, make their Grand Prix debut here, along with Katarina Wolf-Kosten and Dmitry Serovetsky making their Grand Prix debut, also coming back from juniors after going to juniors last season to get a few more opportunities. So, obviously, Fear and Gibson at the top, Guinard and Fabry at the top. The big question is going to be, what do the Shibutanis look like? How do Green and Parsons fare against the Shibutanis and vice versa? To me, this is something that I'm circling, right? I'm definitely want to see that head-to-head matchup. I'm super excited that we're getting that. I'm also excited about the Shibutanis' second Grand Prix and the matchup that they have there as well. And so we've got some, got some interesting things going on here between Fear and Gibson and Guinard and Fabry, and between those couple of top U.S. teams. Moving on to Skate America, we have Lajoie and Lagat, the Maras Czechs in their second Grand Prix, Desmogé and Lemercier in their second Grand Prix, Fragi and Fourneau of France. They are moving up from juniors. Got Loperev and Brazeau, Becker and Hernandez, I'm super excited to see on the Grand Prix. And we've got Talia Lafornara of Italy, who won everything on the Junior Grand Prix this past season. And a lot of people think that that's the team that's going to be trying to get an Italian spot at the qualifying event. We shall see. And then we've got Chalk and Bates. And then we've got Carrera and Ponomarenko. This one looks to be competitive again. Christine and Anthony draw Marjorie and Zach at both of their Grand Prix. So we're gonna hash this out during the Grand Prix season. And boy, it'll be interesting if they split. That'll be interesting because then we'll have to come down to like tiebreaker rules and points scored and all that kind of fun stuff. But we got Loperev and Brazeau in here too. They're all kind of very bunched up together. This is another one that's a super interesting Grand Prix. Like once you get past Chalk and Bates, those three teams that are going to be vying for silver medal spots is going to be very, very interesting. Who might get the U.S. spot here? There's so many options. The Browns only have one assignment. That's a possibility. Peyton By only have one assignment. Might they go with a team that doesn't have any assignments? There's a plethora of U.S. ice dance teams to choose from for sure. And then in Finlandia, this one is one that, again, just totally stands out to me. We've got Gillis and Poirier, the Tashlers, Smart and Deke, Turkula versus Lewis, Orihara Pirinen, Fourneau Baudry Cizeron, Davis Smolkin, the Browns, the Shibutanis, Zingas and Kolesnik. If you look at pretty much every other Grand Prix, there's a team that you'd be like, they're probably going to be 10th. Who's going to be 10th in this field? You tell me. They're all good. All of these teams are fabulous. Gillis and Poirier, that's without saying. They've been within a hair of winning a world title a couple of years now. We don't know what we're going to get with Fonte Baudry and Cizeron, so that's a very interesting head-to-head matchup. And it's the last Grand Prix, so they would have had time to have gotten feedback and applied some of that feedback because they would have been in the first Grand Prix. We've got the Shibutanis here, which are also a huge wild card. So we've got 2 wild cards in here going up against Gales and Poirier, which is super interesting. And then we've got a lot of teams here with a lot of potential, like Smart and Deke, like the Tashlers with the new coaching team, like Zingas and Kolesnik, who are on the rise, like the Browns, who are on the rise, like Orihara and Pirinen, who are on the rise, like Turkula and Verse Lewis in their home Grand Prix, who are also really, really good. How did we have a Grand Prix this stacked? I want a ticket to go to Finland. Again, take my little spice and let's put 2 jalapenos on the Finlandia trophy because it's super, super spicy. Please, nobody get injured and have to withdraw. I want this exact lineup. All right, moving on to the last discipline, and that is the women. Starting at Grand Prix France, we have Nina Petrokina, Lorraine Shield of France, 2 other to be determined from France, Amy Nakai of Japan, moving up for juniors. She's not the only one moving up for juniors, so makes it even more interesting. We've got Rion Sumiyoshi and Kaori Sakamoto, also of Japan, Cheon Kim, Young Yu, who is back. The suspension has been lifted. Livia Kaiser of Switzerland, Isabeau Levito, and Elise Lynn Gracie. So when I tweeted out earlier today, this was one of the ones that stood out to me because you've got Kaori, Isabeau, Cheon Kim, Nina Petrokina, Amy Nakai, like all in the same Grand Prix. That's crazy. That's crazy. And I mean, Rion is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, she's someone who's medaled in most of her Grand Prix, it feels like. Young Yu has a lot of potential. No idea what we're going to get out of her having a year off. Emotionally, what that's been like for her. Livia Kaiser is someone I was really excited about going into last season. Just never really could get the triple triples in competition. Just so many triple doubles. Can she kind of rebound from that last season? Of course, Isabeau, who has just got, to me, nerves of steel, just so fantastic when it counts at Worlds. And then Elise Lynn Gracie. How does she rebound from last year? She came back and got a medal at the World Juniors, where she didn't compete in juniors all last season. She competed just in seniors. I think there was a little bit less pressure on her there. But what does this look like for her? And what does Nina look like? She was just lights out at Europeans in that free program. She's got all of the goods. So this is a pretty stacked Grand Prix at the top. Very excited for this one. And it has huge implications for Grand Prix final because you look at somebody like Kaori, Cheon, Isabeau. Those are people that you would think would be in the Grand Prix final anyway, and they're all going head to head. And Cheon hasn't made Grand Prix final because she usually has one wonky kind of Grand Prix that keeps her out of there. So is this the year that she finally gets there? Cup of China, we've got Yizhu and then 2 to be determined spots for China. Anastasia Gubanova, Rino Matsuke, Hana Yoshida, Rinka Watanabe, Haiyan Lee, Jia Shin, making her senior debut. She did not have a great juniors last year, but she really was pushing Mao Shimada for a lot of her junior career. So it'll be interesting to see how she slots in with the seniors. I think it's something we've all been looking forward to for probably like 3 years now. Then we've got Kimmy Rapond, Amber Glenn, and Alyssa Liu going head-to-head, which is wild. So we have 3 really strong Japanese ladies who are going to be doing their best to try to get in front of Mona Chiba and Wakaba Higuchi. Let's just go ahead and put Kaori on to the Olympic team, right? I think the other 2 are penciled in. And so these are probably the 3 biggest contenders for those other spots. You know, you could throw Rion in there to an extent, but I think Hana Yoshida and Rinka Watanabe probably make the most sense. And they're going head to head here. Anastasia Gubanova, has she had a good Grand Prix? Like 2 good programs at a Grand Prix. It always seems like it's either one or the other, and then she all of a sudden gets it together at Europeans. Can she get it together for once in the Grand Prix? Would be really good to see. And then, of course, you know, a head-to-head matchup between Amber and Alyssa is super interesting. Again, huge implications for Grand Prix final. And where does Jia Shin fit into all of this? All right, let's move on to Skate Canada. We've got Nina Pinzaroni, Belgium, Sarah Maud Dupuis, Madeline Schizas of Canada, a to-be-determined spot for Canada, Lorinaki Gutmann of Italy, Yuna Aoki of Japan, who did not retire, Mona Chiba, Amy Nakai, Asun Yoon of Korea, Sarah Everhart, Isabel Lobito, and Brady Tennell, all at the same Grand Prix. Crazy. So this one is a little bit less top heavy in that it seems mostly like Mona Chiba, Isabel, kind of at the top here, with Sarah, Brady, and Nina all kind of pushing for those next spots. But Yuna Aoki medaled at NHK last season. Amy Nakai, I have huge expectations for her. This girl was landing triple axels, triple toes in juniors last season. Okay. She's no joke. And then Nina Pinzeroni always has beautiful programs. How is her rotations coming on along? Last season, she was just kind of in the mix a lot, couldn't quite get on the podium, but all of the bones are there. So this is a pretty competitive Grand Prix also. You know, if you're Sarah Maud Dupuis and you want to try to, get a look for the Olympic team, you absolutely need to beat Madeline Skeesays here. And Madeline Skeesays, I think, is pretty close to being in ink, kind of like Kaori Sakamoto is for Canada. But, ice is slippery and anything can happen, right? All right, let's move on to NHK. We've got the return of Luna Hendricks. So exciting, against her Belgian teammate, Nina Pinzeroni, who's going back-to-back. We've got Catherine Medlin-Spence, who is getting a Grand Prix assignment for Canada, Anna Pizzetta of Italy, Wakaba Higuchi, who's debuting a bit late. And then we've got Kaori Sakamoto. They're going head-to-head. I don't know if I like that, but okay. A to-be-determined spot for Japan. Sofia Samoldakina of Kazakhstan making her Grand Prix debut. Young Yu, Kimi Rapon, Sarah Everhart, who's going back-to-back also. And then Elise Lynn Gracie. So again, very competitive. It certainly looks like Kaori's to win. Where is Wakaba at? Can she push Kaori? Can she make sure that she's on the podium? What does Luna look like, right? We know Luna can push Kaori at her best, but what does she look like missing so much, pretty much all of last season with the ankle, I believe that it was. So this is a pretty competitive Grand Prix too. I mean, all the women's ones for the past 2 seasons have been pretty competitive, but yeah, I like Kaori, Wakaba, Luna. Here, Seven Everhart's a huge wild card. Sofia Samoldakina can be too. I think people were expecting a little bit more out of her last season than what they got. I didn't think her programs were great. I thought she got better as the season went along, though. She is coached by Rafael Arturian. He's going to have her ready to go in the Grand Prix this season. And at Skate America, we have Leah Serna of France, Anastasia Gubanova, Laura Naki Gutmann, Wakaba Higuchi. So she's going back-to-back. Boy, that's a tough back-to-back to go from Japan to New York. That's tough. Anna Yoshida, Chaeyoung Kim, Hyeon Lee, Katarina Kurakova of Poland. We have Alyssa Liu, and we have 2 to-be-determined spots for the U.S. So they didn't do what the men did. They have 3 spots here. But to-be-determined could be a number of people. It won't be Lindsay Thorgren. Actually, just came out like a little over an hour ago that she's been removed from world standing points. And it was sort of looking like she had retired just based on the fact that she was not in the U.S. funding envelope when that was released a few weeks ago, but it just pretty much all but confirms it. So it won't be Lindsay Thorngren. Is Ava Marie Ziegler healthy? Is she able to skate? Might this be Star Andrews? Might this be Josephine Lee? A lot of different options that this could be for the U.S. And then in Finlandia trophy, we've got Luna Hendricks again, Madeline Skeesays, Nina Petrokina. So she's got the long wait between her second Grand Prix. Finnish skater I am not familiar with. Ida Karhunen is what it looks like for me. She's moving up from juniors. Looks like she was 4th at World Juniors 2 years ago and then 11th last year at Junior Worlds. I can't place her, but she will be one of the host spots and then 2 to-be-determined spots. We've got Lorraine Shield of France, Mona Chiba, Rino Matsuke, Rion Shomiyoshi, Amber Glenn, and Brady Tennell. So Luna versus Amber, totally here for that. Versus Mona Chiba, versus Petrokina. Rino Matsuke had gorgeous programs the last couple seasons. What did they come up with this season? Can she get back into a Grand Prix final? Can she put herself in that conversation for a Japanese Olympic spot? I think this could be, pretty competitive at the top for sure. And Brady gets a chance against two of the top American women. I mean, she's going to be against Isabeau at Skate Canada and then against Amber here to try to make her case for the Olympic team as well. So I think of the women's, I'm looking at Grand Prix France like real strong. That to me looks like the most interesting matchups for sure. Yeah. And then maybe NHK Trophy too. Those are the two that kind of stand out to me. All right. So that is my thoughts on all four disciplines, Grand Prix assignments. I've got to make a decision now. Am I going to Lake Placid? Am I going to try to go to Saskatoon for Skate Canada? Am I just going to be sitting at home watching this? I have no idea, but I need to make those decisions, right? I was kind of waiting for Grand Prix assignments to come out to sort of make a final decision. And I don't know yet. I still don't know, but I'm going to marinate on it over the weekend. But what are some of the events that really stand out to you? Who are you looking forward to? What do you think about the comebacks? Shui and Han, the Shibutanis, the new couple of Fournier Baudry and Cizeron. Are you excited about some of the junior skaters that we're going to see on the Grand Prix this season? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to leave a comment if you're watching the video, or you can also leave a comment on Spotify. You can send me a line at thecuttingedgepod@gmail.com. You can also find me, comment on any of the socials at Ice Skate Podcast, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter is where I'm most active, but I also do post on Threads from time to time as well. All right, thank you guys so much for listening. I'm going to go back to taking my break, and I'll be back in July with my career look back of Shama Uno. Until then, thank you guys. Have a good rest of your day.